Hello, everybody. I want to talk today about how high profile cases are tried in the court of public opinion. They are, in fact, trial by media. I think that the Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Whitmer Fednapping hoax case is a perfect way to illustrate and highlight this. It was a very high profile case due to the federal case. The other state case, the two state cases have gotten some attention, but they're not as high profile because it isn't, a federal conspiracy case. But from the beginning, right, like the government, if it's a case, of course, involving the federal government, the government obviously has the upper hand. They have the advantage. They have unlimited resources. They have teams of investigators available to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have prosecutors who, are trained to do this stuff for a living, and they have time. They get to choose. They have the time to build the case, and they are basically the government presents their case, and then the defense is supposed to be able to present theirs. And we're supposed to have, the presumption of innocence. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and you're supposed to have the right to a fair and speedy trial, and you're supposed to have a right to have a jury of your peers. Now, a couple things before we get into talking about trial by media, like what is happening in the, I think, modern age, where I think that it's impossible to have a jury for cases like that where the jury has no knowledge of the case, like they haven't heard anything from the media. And the media will, in most cases, be parroting the government narrative. Like the court system, the media gives preference to authority figures. They always provide the government's narrative. That's always what it is. And they're part of this whole thing, by the way. They know exactly what they're doing. Social media is part of it also. I just want people to consider what you might do if you ever get thrust into a situation, God forbid, something happens and you're forced to defend yourself, for example, and then the government decides that you should be tried for that. And it's some big high profile thing, and you get smeared and slandered. Imagine being in that position, and what that must be like to have people that have such emotional and strong reactions to things that they haven't even really researched themselves. They're just relying on what the mainstream media is telling them. So I want to, just give you a thought experiment. You guys remember the mugshots going around for the men who are whose trial starts tomorrow. Actually, the third trial of the Governor Whitmer Fednapping hoax here. Although the man in the upper right corner should be removed because that's Sean Fix. He was the man posing as a fake Navy SEAL who took a plea deal. But you have Eric at the top, and then you have Bill and Michael Null, the Null brothers, at the bottom here. And this is the image that people see. This is what gets splashed across all of the news headlines, every single article from mainstream media. You're going to see these pictures of these men. And let's be real, mugshots are designed to look a certain way. They make you look guilty. And the way that they arrest people, it's not like you're given the opportunity to make yourself look very nice and innocent or whatever. These are pre-dawn raids usually, and this is what happens. And so this is the image, though, that people associate you with, and they don't see you as a real person. They see people as a caricature. And so I want to show, you've seen the first picture of Eric, and now you can see him here with his children. I have a video of him with his kids up on the channel. You can watch that as well, and you can see the difference between these dueling narratives of who this person is. And I think that in a high-profile case like this, these people have not been given a fair chance, because I think that their lawyers made a mistake by not having a public relations and media strategy in place on day one. I would be, this obviously I'm not a lawyer, but if it was up to me, I would be going big and loud everywhere. Like, I don't know why these defense lawyers were not taking the opportunity to go on to places like Fox News or any other uh, outlet that would have them on. you know let's look at this picture of Adam and Barry, their mugshots. These are the second mugshots. There's earlier ones as well that are just as bad. This again is the image that people associate with the people in this case. It is an unfair representation of them. When you see this is Adam, outside of that one mugshot. You can see him with his when he's young with his sister and she's a baby. There's a picture of his mom with him as a kid, picture with him and his sister, and it's the same for Barry. You saw the mugshot of Barry, but when you see him with his family, with his kids, maybe you have a different idea about him as a person, who he is as a person. It's the same with the Null brothers. You could see the mugshot of them where they try to make him look really scary. And then you see things like this, and it tells a different story. And so, when you see them with their families, with their children, you'll have a totally different association than the ones that you see from just these mugshots and from what people hear from the media. And every article I've read on this is literally just parroting the government's narrative. Like, there's no actual journalism happening, in my opinion. And so now I want to talk about the trial by media thing, because I think it's interesting. And I have something I want to read here. This is from, and I'll include a link in the video description. This is from a report, Is a Fair Trial Possible in the Age of Mass Media? And I think this is a very good question. And so here's an interesting fact. It says, when juries were first introduced in England around 800 years ago, most of the population in England at the time lived in small villages. So when people served on a jury, they would often intimately know the people that were involved in the case, and oftentimes they were aware of the circumstances of the case. In fact, for one to serve as a juror, such knowledge was required, but over time, that changed, obviously, as times change. Jurors then were supposed to be considered more neutral, or to have little or no knowledge about the case that they heard. But today, of course, with mass communications and 24-hour news cycles and clickbait and etc., it is almost impossible for that to be a thing. And so the question is, does this intense media coverage influence how jurors decide their verdicts? That's a very good question. Yes, so due to mass media, jurors often have facts about defendants and their alleged crimes before, keyword, before hearing any evidence in court. And I've argued with people online who don't know anything about the case, and it's obvious they didn't listen in to the trial. They're just going off of things that they've read from a mainstream media article, which I think is ridiculous. Does it prevent a jury from deciding cases solely from the evidence presented at trial? I think yes. I think that negative media coverage biases the trial in advance. And I will say, for this one coming up, the final trial in the Governor Whitmer Fednapping hoax, this case, these men were arrested and charged back in October of 2020. We're in 2023 now, and they're just getting a trial now. There's been so much media coverage. If you live in Michigan, it is impossible that you haven't heard about this, that you're going to go in completely impartial. It's just not a thing. So I think that people need to be realistic and operate within that framework. But let's continue with this. It says, a recent study has concluded that, quote, there is substantial data in this, as well as other studies, to demonstrate that pretrial publicity prejudices jurors, and there is little reason to believe that this prejudice is removed before jurors hear testimony and reach verdicts, unquote. This suggests that in heavily publicized, so high profile cases, jurors may ignore the basic principle of American criminal law that a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And I would say beyond a reasonable doubt as well. And so I think that that's something people need to think about, because I think it's easy to go through your life, if you've had no interaction with the criminal justice system, and just like never think about these things. Never think about what is the impact of social media and, mainstream media on society. What is the impact of having media consolidation, of going from having 50 different media outlets in the 80s to basically 6 multinational corporations controlling 90% of what everybody reads and sees and hears. I think that that's insane. And, for high profile federal cases, those cannot be broadcast. The rules as they stand of criminal procedure bar any recording in federal court, so it can't be broadcast to the public. Most people don't call in and listen. Most people don't attend in person. So really, they're relying on the media for their understanding of this. And so, I think that if you Google these guys, the guys in the Whitmer hoax, and you look them up, you're only going to see one narrative. You're only going to see one side of the story. And I think that for people who are defendants in these high profile cases, I really think that they should be, from day one, engaging some type of media professional, somebody that can help prepare that. I think they should take the stand in their own defense, because I think people need to see them as who they really are. Now, I'm not a lawyer. Again, it's a case by case basis whether or not that's advisable in this, for each person's particular situation. But I do think that people need to rethink these things. I think a lot of, criminal defense lawyers don't want to put their clients up there if they don't have to, right? Because the burden of proof is supposed to be on the government. And you would think if they don't have the evidence, surely a jury would follow like what they're supposed to do and not convict them. But this is often not the case. In fact, you can look at how much evidence what there was in the Whitmer case for that retrial. The jury deliberated it was so short, they didn't even have time to get through any of the reviewing any of the exhibits or the evidence, I would suggest, before they came to their verdict. And so I think that people really need to consider this, and I'm interested to hear what people's thoughts are on it, because I really don't know. It's not like we can go backwards, right? We're in the mass media age, the age of mass communications, digital communication, instant communication. We're in the, age of the 24-hour news cycle. And, I think that it's just unavoidable. So I think that if you can't avoid having your case unfairly prejudiced, if you're a high profile case, I think that people have to consider having their own strategy for engaging the media and getting their side out ahead of time, and trying to actively provide the other side of the story, the other picture. And I think that that would ensure a more fair trial. But that's just my thoughts. Anyways, I may or may not be having some tech problems here. So if the camera's cutting in and out, I don't know why that would be. It is new. So, well, not new, but just new to my setup, I've had it just wasn't using it for this. So anyways, if it's recording and that shows up in the recording, sorry. Now I'll get it fixed. Anyways, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this and how you feel, what this means, for society in general. And even if in cases that aren't necessarily super high profile, like on a national or like even international scale, like the Whitmer case was, I mean, global headlines, right? Even still, though, even for something that isn't quite that high profile, it still, I think, is important to have this in place. And I think that um, everybody should consider it. But, anyways, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this. Is it possible to have a fair trial in the modern age? Is it possible to have fair and impartial juries? And I really also want to have a conversation at some point about how the juror selection process happens and all of that. But I'll end it here for now. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Let me know. Wee!